Hello, everyone, and welcome to the BrickSide Chat Podcast, where we take your questions and turn them into conversations. I'm Paul.
And I'm Evan.
And today, we're excited to talk about making the most of the resources that you already have.
Now, we often talk about you need to spend money to make money, and I think we seriously do believe that.
Definitely.
However, sometimes you just can't. You don't always have the money, the financial resources to do something.
Yeah.
So I think
sometimes it's also just better that if you have something that works, you know, not to break it and spend extra resources too.
Yeah. So today we have a lot of tips and tricks, I think, in terms of like using those resources to their full capabilities, whatever you might already have versus going out and trying to spend more money. However, I do want to say before we really get into it that I do agree, if you don't have the right tool for the job, the best option is to get the right tool for the job, which sometimes does cost money.
Correct.
Or generally does.
The focus of this episode is not necessarily penny pinching. It's going to be, well, we're going to kind of need to define what resourcefulness is, but the main goal of this episode is more talking about two types of situations. One being where you actually cannot afford the correct tool for the job. You're aware that what you have is not the best, but it is not possible for you to get the correct thing. Like, obviously, if we could spend tens of thousands of dollars to build some very fancy machine to sort all of our Lego, we would, but that's not going to happen.
But it might be coming.
It might be.
There's a lot of people working on it.
So instead, we go with a less efficient solution. But it's important to understand that if you do have the resources to get the right tool, then you should. The second type of resourcefulness that we're going to be talking about is more about understanding whether or not you do in fact have the right tool for the job, because you might. It just might not be in a form that you realize. There are lots of different ways to perform a task, and if you can perform the same task with the same efficiency without spending money, then obviously, or maybe spend 10 minutes to build something and save a couple $100 and the efficiency is the same. Like, for example, building a shelf maybe instead of buying a shelf. That might be, depending on lumber prices, that might be a bit iffy, but just that's kind of the general idea of what we're talking about. So the first step to really understanding resourcefulness or implementing resourcefulness in your business or in your store or whatever is going to be understanding and taking full account of what you already have.
Yeah, one thing before we get into specifically this, I do want to say that I think, and obviously we haven't been in a ton of niche markets and stuff, but the market we're in specifically, I think, is incredibly resourceful. The people who are in it, it's a lot of hobbyists and stuff where it's not a business per se, like a big business, so it's like spending that money is hard. So I'd say a lot of people who are in it are already very resourceful in terms of like, if you have a bin, you're going to use it versus like buying consistent bins or something like that.
Yeah.
I think the market is for sure very resourceful, but you can continue with
And I think this is something that we aren't too good at, is tracking our resources. So I do want to preface with that, but we do have, some sheets and stuff just to have a general idea as to all of the assets and stuff we have. And so the first step that you're going to want to take if you want to really be able to fully extract the value from everything, and that really is what resourcefulness actually is. It's being able to extract all of the meaningful or maybe all of the efficient value from an object or a concept or an idea or anything like that before you discard it. Because objects have lots of different uses, and that's something we're going to talk about later. But the first step is going around and making a list of everything you have. And this list, it can be as exhaustive as you want, but you do really want to think through, because there are lots of things that people just kind of gloss over. And IP, thoughts, your partner dynamic with your business partner, all of those things are resources as well. And I think that's something that definitely gets glossed over a lot. So the first step is going to be being aware of what you have. And once you have a list of everything that you have, it's going to be important to learn how to leverage it. And this is kind of the second pillar of resourcefulness that we've identified.
Yeah, and I think sometimes you have to get really creative with how you leverage things.
Definitely.
Something that I'm sure will get brought up later again, but I know we were talking about last night when we were building out this outline was, there's that phrase that's like one man's trash is another man's treasure or something. You can kind of think of that in the sense of like quite literally where if you are parting out Lego sets, and we'll talk about this in the Lego world right now. I know not every business listening to this is that way, but if you part out a set, you have now Lego boxes. Some people use those boxes to ship in. Some people use the bags. Some people cut up the boxes to make like dividers or something. So it's literally like what is and looks like trash can actually, get creative with it. And you can use it to lessen your costs or to make, a little more efficient or something.
Yeah.
By literally taking what should be thrown away or generally would be thrown away and turning it around.
Yeah, definitely. Instead of wasting something that you spent money on, right, the Lego set, if you can go ahead and turn that into a lasting asset like a divider for our drawers, that's going to that really is resourcefulness. Excuse me. The other important aspect, I guess the third tenet, is going to be understanding that resources are not entirely segregated. Just because one resource might typically be classified as one thing. Money is an awful example of this, but maybe something like this is not going to be the best example either, but like a pen, right? Obviously, a pen is a writing tool.
So something like a bin. You might look at a bin and see that it's really big, and like when you pour pieces in it, you need to have a lot of pieces in there. And then you might look at a different thing like bags, and you put bags in every order. But when you combine those bins and the bags together, you can now leverage like the full capability of the bin without filling it halfway up with one type of piece. And you can now put 2 bags in there and fill it up 100% with 2 types of pieces or something. And you're using your space now in your bins better. Because you combine. That's like a very dumbed down version. Yes. But
because this is often the most complex step in the sense of how you can combine different resources. And honestly, it's usually something that you do without even thinking about it. It's just a natural part of how humans operate. Part of what allows us to be, a dominant species is our ability to synthesize new solutions. And oftentimes we do this so subconsciously. Like, for example, if you're in a meeting, you just grab a pen and write something down when you have an idea. That's actually really complicated. Like, that requires so many steps. And I'm not going to get into like psychology or anything here, but if you, instead of just grabbing the pen, if you go through your life thinking about all of that, you can start to see how all the pieces connect. And that is how you can learn to properly extract every little bit from every resource, is by seeing how this resource might look depleted, right? You have an empty bin now that was full of Lego. So, because oftentimes when we used to get Lego from our suppliers, it would come in these plastic bins. And these bins were basically trash. They just stacked up. But then we started to use them to store non-sellable, which we eventually intend to flip, or we would start to use them to store A-sort, which is unprocessed Lego just sitting around instead of us having to spend money on bins. Sometimes they hold bags. Just instead of us buying storage equipment, we are now using basically this trash for something else. And it doesn't have to be trash. This extends to all kinds of resources, including human ones. Just because an employee might be done with their task for the day, but they're still on the clock, that doesn't mean you can't give them something else, right? There are lots of different ways that you can combine resources. And kind of the last tenet that I want to talk over with understanding resourcefulness is knowing when you have spent too much. There's something called the sunk cost fallacy. I'm sure most people have heard of that at this point, but it is a little misunderstood. Just because you have spent a lot of resources on something doesn't mean that you shouldn't finish it.
Yeah,
right?
Essentially, if you have spent we'll say you had a budget of $5,000 on a project, and you've spent all $5,000, and now you've spent $6,000, then $7,000, then $8,000, and you only need $2,000 more to finish it. You really need to figure out,
should you spend $2,000?
Is that $2,000 more actually worth it? Is it actually going to finish it? Can you now make back your 200% expenditure on what you thought it was going to be?
Yeah. Google is either really good or really bad at this, depending on your perspective. But Google, they innovate a lot of new software solutions, and then they cancel them just as fast. If you look at the Google graveyard, it is filled with so many cool ideas. And oftentimes they extract the working parts of these ideas and put them into different projects. But so many things, like they're even willing to launch entire physical lines of product, spend probably billions of dollars on R&D for something, and then just a year later decide, nah, it's not worth it, and toss it. And that's because they realize that, hey, this might have been a good idea and it didn't work. I'm not going to try and sell something that's losing me money. And that is something that you should be aware of with everything you do. It can be really hard, especially running a small business where your level of emotional investment into every project is so much higher. And something is to be said here about pet projects. If you look at a lot of eccentric billionaires and stuff, they do have pet projects. Now, obviously, we're not eccentric billionaires. So we probably never will be. But if there is a project that you are really passionate about, it's sometimes okay to let it keep going so long as it's not really hurting stuff. You need to look at the loss and make sure that this is something that you're okay with, right? You shouldn't just be, destroying the things that you love just in the name of making some money. But if there's something that, maybe you just enjoy, or maybe you just like, or maybe even that you love, if there's 10 projects that you love, maybe pick one that's going to be your pet project that you're going to continue to sink resources into. If you are really interested in just making money, then you probably need to kill all 10 of them if they're a waste. But
yeah, and this is a really, really hard one. Whether like even for us, we've struggled with this for sure.
Definitely.
Where we're doing something and it's like we love it so much, but at the end of the day, we are running a business, and we need to realize that, okay, it doesn't make sense to do this because it's costing us this amount of money, whatever. And okay, it's finally time to throw this idea away, or whatever it might be. And then we've had other things where it's like we just keep going and going and going because we love it and love it and love it. And the further along we get, we still love it and we're still having fun, but we're questioning, is this really worth it? Probably not.
I hope it is. But
like there's a lot of things like that, and it's, you do, especially like you just mentioned with a small company, get attached to it. And actually that's one of the things where I think with bigger companies, they're way more successful at being able to shutter things because they have someone at the top just looking at it as at a bottom line and say, okay, this, look, we're losing this much money. We can't do it. And then it just goes down the chain. And obviously a lot of people, I'm sure, are hurt from that, and they really, they're disappointed and sad, but those people that really loved it aren't the ones that had to make that cut. So it's way easier for that whole company as a big company to just say, kill it. Whereas for smaller ones, it's like we struggle so much because we love something and we have a lot of fun. And you, even though it's not working and you consciously know it's not working, you want it to work so bad that you just keep trying and trying and trying. And eventually, sometimes it just doesn't pan out, which is really disappointing. But it's just the truth of,
Exactly.
Not every idea is a great idea.
Exactly. And we have talked about this before. I think it was in our not stepping on failure, although crushing failure underfoot would be a good topic. But it was how to use failure as a stepping stone, I think, where we talked about when a project does fail, you shouldn't just ignore it. You should dissect it and extract every learnable opportunity that you can from it.
Yeah, even that is a resource.
It is.
Like even the, actually, I just wrote a letter or something the other day where, I had to talk about how I feel that the failures in my life or the failures at points in my life about like whether it's even a tiny project or whatever, I feel like I learned so much more from that than I do from when something works. Because when something works, you're not consciously thinking, why is it working? By default, you should be, but it's hard to do that. But when something doesn't work, you almost always go back and analyze. I'd say failures are almost more valuable than successes in terms of using that as a resource to understand your business or anything, really.
Definitely. I feel like it's easier to figure out why something is failing than why something is succeeding. Because if something is succeeding, it can be really hard to look back retrospectively. But with a failure, you kind of have like the complete, analysis, assuming you've been taking notes and stuff. But yeah, you need to be willing to kill your darlings, right? That's kind of a writing phrase, but you have to be willing to step away from a project and get as many resources back as you can when you do so. Now, this
sorry. Before we go on, one other thing I want to say is, and we probably sort of talked about this in failures, but I think since you just talked about getting as many resources back as you can, you do need to understand that you have spent time, money, energy, whatever on something. You still need to be willing to kill the project and understand that might just be gone now.
Yeah.
I have a problem with this where it's like when something doesn't work, I just sit there and I'm like, oh, and I'm really annoyed and I'm frustrated and stuff. But you can't get that time back. You probably can't get that money back, etc. And it is what it is, unfortunately. And to sit there and pout over it is actually now just putting
wasting
yourself
more money
into more debt with your time and your effort and everything. Sorry, I just wanted to throw that out there since you said get back your resources.
True.
The resources you can get back are the learning experiences and understanding why something didn't complete its way through.
So knowing all of this, why is it important? And hopefully it should be a little bit self-evident as to how it can be important. But something that I did want to bring up specifically regarding very early startups, this is the first couple months of starting up, is especially with a high-risk idea, like something that's untested or something that you personally don't have experience with, is your risk of dropping out is way higher. Now, obviously, you might be super motivated during this time, but there's going to be a fall off where you're going to lose that motivation. And that is going to be probably the most likely time where the project's going to fail early on, right? There's kind of this plateau of stability that you get to eventually. But before that, there's this mountain of motivation, right? And then you crash. And you should have a self-understanding that there's a possibility that you aren't going to make it through this. And therefore, you should avoid spending additional resources until you're confident that this works. Now, sometimes you do just need to go all in. And Evan and I have gone all in on a lot of stuff. But you should be going all in intelligently. You should be spending the minimum amount of resources necessary to confirm that this does in fact work. And then you should grow a lot.
Another thing is at the beginning, usually you just don't have the resources.
That's very true.
So it's like maybe you want to throw in what you can, but usually you don't actually have that much, which I think is actually sometimes a benefit, because when it doesn't work, you now haven't thrown everything you have into it.
Correct.
Or if it doesn't work. But obviously, 3 years later, hopefully you have thrown most of everything you have. And then at that point, if it doesn't work, that's a bigger disappointment. But yeah.
Very early on, stretching your resources is really, really important.
Mm-hmm.
It is important, though, not to let that mindset last too long. Now, you should be extracting resources from everything, but going from extracting 80% of the value of a resource to extracting 20% to going to extracting 99% is going to cost way more. So just do be aware that very early on, it might be worth spending the time to get every last little bit of value. But as you grow and your time becomes more valuable and you grow out, you scale more, spending that extra little bit might not be worth it. And then eventually at a certain point later on, it may become worth it again. Right.
Yeah. There's this weird
middle ground,
because we're trying to say use all your resources, but when you're small enough, you need to use all your resources. There is a point where, like you just said, in that middle, it's like all of a sudden it doesn't make sense anymore because it actually costs more resources, money, whatever. And then there is another point where like you get big enough where now if you were 10% inefficient in the middle because it made sense, that 10% inefficiency might be costing you tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars or something.
Correct. And you also then gain the potential resources to be able to fix that more efficiently. Rather than just pouring more man hours into it, you might have the money to hire someone specialized who can fix it for a quarter of the cost that you would have been able to, right? And that's something that's not available to a medium-sized business or a small-sized business. So just keep that in mind as you're growing. It's very important to have the resourceful mindset in the beginning.
Not that it's bad to have it in the long run, but it can hurt you.
There are degrees of resourcefulness.
Yeah, I think there are some people who are so not really tight with money in terms of like they don't have it to spend or something, but they want to be tight with money. They want to be very careful in terms of what they're spending and how they're spending it and all that stuff. And sometimes I think that actually hurts the businesses more when they really don't want to spend. Let me try to think of an example here. Like, I don't know.
Label printer?
Label printer, sure. If you're making more than $1,000 a month and you're processing, let's say, 50, 60 orders a month, you can spend, I think, a one-time investment of $150, $200 for a label printer, and that theoretically should last you a very long time, and it'll
Pay
save
for
you
itself in ink.
Yeah, just ink alone. I mean, but like things like that, I think is that's a resource you have to buy, but now once you have it, that's a resource that actually saves so much more time and energy and money.
And note that we didn't say when you first start and are making $0 buy a label printer. If you already have a normal printer and paper and you already have full ink cartridges, then use that until you're making enough to buy it, right? That's where the resourcefulness comes in, right?
Right, because if you stop, if you go 2 months and like you're like, I don't want to do this anymore, now you have a resource that is, or it's really weird to say resource. You have an asset essentially that you could resell, but you've lost a lot of value on it, and like, or it sits there and doesn't do anything because you're no longer printing shipping labels.
Yeah.
It is a specialized enough thing that you need to make sure you're going to want to stick with this in order to buy that specialized thing. Similar to a counting scale. We made a mistake and we bought it like before we opened for the latest one. And like, it's useful and everything, but at that time that was a dumb decision because had we decided a month later we didn't want to do this anymore, what are you going to do with a counting scale? Like, there's a lot of things like that you want to be cautious with when you're purchasing and growing.
Yeah, definitely. I had another point. Oh, yes. So as you're growing and as you're innovating, you have a unique opportunity to solve problems in a way that most people don't get to experience throughout their life, right? Most people, to draw an analogy from the Lego movie, just get to follow the instructions. Now, I'm not trying to downplay people's unique life experiences. Everyone goes through a lot of very difficult things that require, complex solutions. But when you're managing things that aren't just your own, right? When you're managing a business or when you're trying to extract more value than you put in, and you encounter these very strange, very niche, very specific, complex problems, you're at an opportunity to grow your problem solving and your creativity skills to a whole new level. And that is where starting a business from scratch and growing from a small startup are so fantastic, because you're going to be able to implement this resourcefulness and this creativity throughout your entire business career, right? If you start off by creating a culture of resourcefulness or innovating solutions to problems, right? If you allow yourself to be put into situations where you're going to have to experiment and come up with unique ideas, then you're going to have a much better chance of solving larger problems like that. By the way, I just snapped. I don't know if that got picked up on the mic, but you're going to have a lot better chance of solving even bigger problems as you grow, because you're already going to have trained your brain to look at everything around you as a resource. Because a resource is not just it's not just like a point, right? You're not just playing like a strategy video game, right? A resource is a complex object. And we talked about earlier that cross using your resources across different boundaries. But as you build that way of thinking, and as you build the creative side of resourcefulness, it's going to help train you to think on your feet a lot faster. And that is, in general, going to make you a better person. I would think, especially business-wise.
Yeah, I don't know if better person is a good way to put it, but more valuable asset to a team or something.
Definitely.
Or to even your own business, your own team, for sure. And that's something I think kind of this gets into that next point is, driving creativity and innovation as a resource, essentially. And we I'll go back for a second and mention this. Like when we were at the very beginning, we were buying these acrylic cut dividers for our acromill drawers, and I don't remember the exact cost. They were 30 something, I think, cents a piece. They might be more or less now. I don't remember, but we were buying them, and they're great, but they're very expensive. And it's because there weren't enough on the back of the acromilled units. So for a while, we would cut up the boxes, like we mentioned 15, 20 minutes ago, and we'd put the boxes in, and those were great because they were free. However, they didn't last super long, and we really didn't like that they weren't semi-transparent. And then there was the time to go cut the boxes and stuff, but that was pretty minimal. So, we decided we wanted something that was a higher quality than a box, or a piece of cardboard, but we weren't willing to spend however many cents per divider. So we, researched and figured out a better idea, and we went out and bought a 3D printer and transparent material, and we started 3D printing our own dividers, and we have thousands of those now. And there was the initial investment cost of buying the printer. There was the initial investment cost of buying each container of resin that actually makes the thing, and then the initial investment time of just figuring out how to do this, what size do we need to make these, etc. But eventually, we came up with a good design, and we can print like 52 or 50 per print or something.
Yeah.
And they cost just a few cents each, which over time saved a lot more money versus the clear acrylic dividers that were 30 or whatever cents per piece. Now, obviously, there is a little bit of time invested of like the actual printing and stuff, but we saved a lot of money over time, and we could have saved more money with the boxes, but these are significantly better for what we want. They don't break as easily as or fold as like a cardboard piece. They are transparent, so we can see through, so we got what we wanted.
Yeah.
But we had to be creative when it came to like coming up with that idea.
Something I do want to touch on, it's a little bit of a going back to a different topic, but this isn't like a real term. It's just the term I would best use to describe it. But the subscription mindset of paying $15 a month to have access to all of this stuff, that's great for something where it's a value, like a streaming service where you have all of this content. But like, let's just say you only liked Star Wars, like specifically the movies, and that was it. You didn't want to watch the rest of the content, but you watched them a lot. Going out and buying the Blu-ray discs is going to be way more worth your money than paying for Disney Plus. And that is a trap that I think a lot of people in business can get into. Now, I'm not talking about paying a subscription fee for like, payroll management or something. I'm talking about like our dividers. That was basically a subscription fee. We were paying, $30, $50 a month, or not a month, but whatever, to buy all these things, when it made way more sense to just go out, make a almost one-time cost for this 3D printer, which was way more upfront. But looking at this as being a permanent expense, it was way cheaper. Now, obviously, we have to buy resin and stuff, and that's still kind of a subscription cost, but it is way lower. So it can sometimes be hard to rationalize, especially when your budget is so tight in the beginning, where I need dividers and I only have $50 a month. Saving is not really possible right now. Right?
Yeah,
There is that. But also, if you don't necessarily put that $50 aside, you might not grow, right? So there is this very difficult to navigate puzzle, and that is where the creativity and the resourcefulness comes in.
Yeah,
calling back,
and the resourcefulness also is like problem solving.
Yeah.
And the cool thing is, like, when you really think about it, a lot of products and things are created when a problem is trying to be solved. Now, the problem that they were trying to solve doesn't always create the product they wanted, but usually like a product is created sort of on accident. And this is actually something we realized was like sort of the reason for the YouTube channel. And part of the reason we think it's semi-successful is because we would look something up and like, how do you do this on BrickLink? And nothing would come up. We couldn't figure it out. It was not an easy answer. So then we had to go figure out how to do it. And now we felt like, okay, now we can put a video out and this might be helpful to people. And now the frustrating thing is when we forget how to do something and we Google it and our stuff comes up. And it's like, okay, well, apparently I knew how to do this at one point. But yeah, this having a problem and trying to fix that problem is how something, a new idea might appear. I know we've had a lot of things where it's like, I wish we could do this. And the only way to do that is for us to go do it on our own.
Every problem is an opportunity to maximize profit.
Sure. Yeah.
And if you want a nice little alliterative sentence there. And that really is true, because if you don't encounter something that makes you stop and analyze your process on a deep level, you probably you're just going to keep going, and you might be missing out on something. When you encounter a problem, it might unravel into something much deeper. And by solving what you at first thought was just a minor little hiccup, you're able to optimize and save a lot of resources. Mm-hmm. And that is why that is another reason why it's so important to understand your resources.
But another thing with that, like you end up spending a lot at the beginning. Yeah. And then you will save money and time and resources and everything in the long term. But in the short term, which is again why it's so dangerous, I think, at the beginning to start it, because it may not pay off in the beginning if you don't go for more than 2 years or something. Like, we invested in the tape thing, which will save us money, but after however many months it is right now, I don't know, we got it, it's probably been 5 or 6 months since we had it. It hasn't saved us money yet.
Correct.
We're still quote unquote paying it off, and we're not, but like
$1,000 tape dispenser.
It was not $1,000, but it will save us money in the long run. It also provide more opportunities for what we can do potentially. What do you say, $999? It wasn't.
$997, yeah.
It wasn't. Every time you say it, it goes up.
Yeah. Next time it's $1,200.
Okay. Anyway, so, if we bought that right at the beginning, that would have been a colossal bad idea.
Yeah.
But, like, really bad. But we were pretty much in this for the long haul, theoretically. So it's going to pay itself off over time.
Definitely.
But, again, it's a resource that we didn't need until...
Something else to talk about there is the time. Your time isn't free. And it's not just saving us money on buying plastic tape. The tape dispenser is just so fast. That's honestly what has caught my attention the most, besides, it's paper and is recyclable. But
and it gives you the right size. Correct. So you're not wasting tape anymore. You're using the exact size you need for whatever box you need.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the next thing we'll go over a little bit, hard segue.
Yeah.
Love hard segues.
I didn't get to say it.
I know,
this time.
You didn't get to say it. You always say it. Strategies, how can you be more resourceful? So I think one big thing is probably just to get started with this, understanding what types of resources there are. Which we've been talking a lot about, just the word. Maybe we should have started with this.
We did summarize it a little bit.
Okay. There are human resources, not in the HR department, but...
First, I just want to say, this is a list that we defined.
Oh, yes.
I did look up some stuff, but I couldn't find like a single legal definition of all the different types of resources. So
this is what we notice within our business, at least. Yeah. So there's the human resources. In this case, for us, that's a lot of our like manufacturing, quote unquote manufacturing, expenses of like the processing of someone has to do A sort, someone does B sort, someone catalogs, someone uploads, someone picks, someone packages, and then it gets sent out. Like every human aspect of what is being done to the product.
But human resources don't also just equate to labor hours. They also equate to the personality, the capabilities, the knowledge, the engagement. This is something that Evan and I talked about the other day. I have a really bad habit. I guess you could say I'm a gold star employer, because personally that's what works for me. And something that we have talked about before, or maybe we'll talk about eventually, is every employee and every person is different. But for me, I really am the kind of person that gets a joy out of putting a little gold sticker next to my name. And so I tend to baby people a little bit in that way. And that's because it works for me, but it doesn't work for everyone. And human resources are really important because everybody there has a level of engagement. For me to be really engaged with the project, I need to feel like that golden star moment, right? And that's not true for everyone. And so something that can make someone really valuable is that they just love being there. They just love the product, and they just want to be part of this, larger entity purely for the sake of being there. And that's a really valuable person. So when you're calculating human resources, you have to factor in someone's temperament and how well the team works together. It's a really complicated resource. I just wanted to say that it's not just labor hours.
Totally. Especially the skill set that each person brings.
Absolutely.
Because you could have two people that seem equivalent on paper, but as soon as you get them in a situation where someone has to problem solve, one person can completely fail and the other person could completely succeed. And it's all dependent on their past experience and everything. And, that person who fails could hurt your business. That person who succeeds could help grow your business.
Definitely. My dad, who works for a larger business as a manager, has told me some stories about how they'll hire someone and they'll refuse someone else. The person that they hired had a really great resume, and it was all true. They did actually know these skills. But then when they were actually put into a crisis situation where they had to implement these skills under pressure, it all fell apart. Or once they were given a project to manage on their own, they weren't able to execute any of these skills. Even though they could pass every test perfectly fine, it wasn't that they didn't know the skills. It was just that they couldn't apply the skills. Versus this other person that they ended up hiring later didn't necessarily know all the skills, but they were able to just pick them up. And that is also the ability to learn. An employee who can learn just by watching another employee for a little bit is really valuable.
Absolutely. Another type of resource is obviously the sellable resources.
Yeah.
What actually directly 100% returns into a dollar or money.
And I'm not talking about liquidatable assets here. This is what I'm considering as your actual product.
Yeah, inventory, if you're selling physical things, if you're a software company, the software that you license or whatever it might be. If you are a service company, the act of providing that service, that is what directly returns money based on a customer purchasing or buying that product.
This also can be a kind of complicated thing because we obviously deal with a hard good. But let's just say you're working in like a financial sector as like a consultant or something. Your portfolio, even though that's kind of IP, might also be part of this because really what you're selling is the return on that, right? So obviously in that case it is potentially literally cash, and we'll talk about liquid later. But that is important also to say, is that sellable is whatever it is that your customers want.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, what your customers are purchasing. Manufacturing is another type of resource. We talked about this last night. I think you and I actually had a different understanding of what this was. In my thought, this was like the process of taking a quote-unquote raw good and turning it into something that is useful. You had more thought about the machinery in manufacturing.
Yes, I was not counting IP as part of this, unless, like, for manufacturing, I would say that it could be your actual assembly line or the software that you use to process your information. It is whatever it is that directly produces your product, quote, hands-on. Obviously, for some things, there is no physical contact, but it's whatever that basically the machine is that directly produces your product is how I classified it.
Mm-hmm. Another type of resource is very obviously cash or the equivalent of cash, whether that's credit, different things like that. The ability for you to purchase something outright.
Yes.
That is obviously a huge resource, and obviously you want to be making cash or money so that you can go purchase additional assets to help continue to grow or just continue to succeed in your business.
And I wouldn't necessarily count this just as a currency. I would say that this is anything that has a very stable value and is immediately liquidatable, like gold or something like that. You can sell that very quickly for pretty much a known price, right? So I do just want to say, obviously, I don't want to wade into the whole NFT thing here because those are essentially worthless now. But something like where you have a very, very easy to liquidate asset, or an asset that someone directly wants and will trade for another thing is what I would personally say goes here.
Okay, I would put that on another line, but sure. Another resource is obviously your intangible products or your intangible resources, which are like your intellectual properties. Do you have a character that is your company's character that you can leverage to sell more products or to create a TV show or whatever that might be?
Yeah.
Or do you have a patent on some design within your product, and that's now your property because you have that utility patent or whatever on it?
Yep. And recipes, processes, anything really that is completely intangible, not part of manufacturing, I would say would go under IP, because there are lots of types of IP that you can't really legally protect, like trade secrets and stuff, but they're still those are still IP, and IP kind of crosses over into human resources a lot too, because there's obviously the intellectual property in someone's head.
Mm-hmm.
And so a team of writers kind of straddles this line, because obviously there's the writers themselves, but there's also the fact that there's this specific team of writers who's really good and has this constant thing that they're able to create, right? So IP can be very loose.
Right. Another, pretty straightforward resource is the tools that you use.
Yeah.
I think this kind of goes in with manufacturing to a degree. You need certain tools to create a product or to create or to provide a service or whatever it is. And those are critical. And, if one of those tools breaks, we could go as basic as a screwdriver. Let's say it's a physical tool, like something like that.
Yeah.
If the screwdriver breaks and you can't provide your service, you now have lost out on a lot. So you need to, replace that. But that screwdriver is also what allows you to provide your service. So it's a critical resource to your business.
Yeah. I would classify tools as pens, computer.
I would say the physical assets that allow you to do your work.
Yes.
To create your product or provide whatever service.
Yeah, I think I would agree with that.
So yeah, for us that would be pens. I think the acro units allow us to organize the inventory. Shelving allows us to do things. The label printer, counting scale, tape dispenser, all that kind of stuff.
And this is something where if you are for some reason trying to value your business, I feel like this is something that could easily get glossed over, and where you might discover quite a large degree of potential value, because a computer is sellable, a desk is sellable, right? And it's not that these are particularly high value items, but you'd be shocked how many tools you can accumulate over running a business for a long time. And if you are trying to liquidate your entire business or appraise the entire business and you skip over this, you might be shocked when you go back through and look at just how much this stuff is worth on paper. Mm-hmm. Paper being the key word there.
Can you get that dollar amount when you try to flip it? Probably. Who knows? But another big type of resource is the storage space, and not just storage, but physical space. Maybe just space in general, even. We have a defined number of square feet in our garage, quote unquote, our warehouse. There is an exact number. We cannot expand that within that garage. We do not have the capability to do that. So we have to be very resourceful in terms of how we use that square footage.
Definitely.
We've obviously moved into our front living area. We have shelves in there that are storing raw material and product that have not yet been added to the inventory. But for the most part, that is, for us at least, that this has been the hardest resource that we've had a severe limit on.
Definitely.
With the inability to expand.
Definitely.
We've even gone past the unwillingness to expand, because initially we were unwilling to move into the house.
Yep.
We did have that available, and we said, okay, we have to do this.
The space is definitely for us what I think obviously money is always a thing for us too, but for us, it's money's great. I'll always take some free money, but the storage space is really what has been our number one limiting factor. And obviously we can't move out because we can't necessarily afford it, but the space is really the hardest thing to overcome here.
Yeah. Now we're also equivalent to a company that manufactures something and then stores it in a warehouse and then ships it out to a customer. If you are a retail space, you need to think about the cost per square foot in terms of your merchandise, because every piece of merchandise can only provide so much return. And if it takes up a lot of space, and that cost per square foot for that piece of merchandise to sit and take up, let's say 2 square feet, which costs you, I don't know, $8 a month for that little area, but you can only sell this box of something for $4. You better be turning that piece of merchandise 10 times a month, or you're going to be losing money in terms of the square footage. So the space is very, obviously you may seem like you have a ton of space, but you need to be making sure that space is making its money back from what you're selling within that space.
Definitely. I do want to throw out something. I do know that there are a lot of people that sell on Amazon, and I was trying to liquidate some old books on Amazon and have it done by FBA, which is fulfilled by Amazon. Basically have it be stored at their warehouse. And this storage space thing, that's actually what they bill you on. It's the amount of cubic feet that your objects take up in their warehouse. And that can be a very good way to kind of get into the mindset of I need to do this, is look at how much it would cost on FBA. Obviously they are in a warehouse and the costs are totally different, but just to get in the mindset of like, my space is really worth something. For me, that helped me really rethink what space is worth and stuff, because obviously so many people sell things on Amazon and make a profit. And so if you're looking at your product and you couldn't make a profit on Amazon, I'm not saying your product's bad or anything, not at all. I'm just saying you need to be wondering if you can get as good deal on warehouse space as Amazon can.
Right. Something also with the defined amount of space that we've heard just from our little warehouse in the garage is vertical space.
Yeah.
We have one wall that has 5 units tall, but it's really hard to reach the top. And some of our pickers can't actually reach the top without a step stool. So while technically, we provide the step stool and stuff, and we do get more storage with that vertical space, it's a danger to have employees stepping up onto a step stool. There's a way extra liability there. Not countless. I would say maybe 1 drawer a month gets dropped in the store completely, maybe a little more than that. But generally, from my experience at least, it is when reaching up at the top, the highest point.
Yeah.
So while you do have a defined amount of space, not 100% of the space that you have might be
useful.
Yeah, I was going to say usable, but it is usable, but might not be properly useful. So keep that in mind as well.
I think for resourcefulness here is, depending on safety, liability, the space you have, and how permissive your landlord is storing things that are almost never used overhead, like in an attic, right? If you can build basically a second floor or a loft or something like that, back to resourcefulness of, creatively and intelligently using the space. Just because you can't store product there doesn't mean that other things can't go there.
Absolutely. And another thing to think of that too is like, we have a storage unit. Sort of. It's not technically just a brick in the buckets, but there is a storage unit that we use, which stores our non-sellable stuff. It stores bins and bins of Duplo, since we don't have the room to list Duplo. It has tons of bags of new, since we don't know exactly the best way to process new yet, that we just find like random bags and stuff for. So we're using that storage space, and that's off-site completely. And it costs significantly less than on-site. You can think of something like that too. If you don't access things all the time, you don't need to have a 10,000 square foot warehouse if you only need 8,000 square feet and you can store 2,000 square feet somewhere else that never get accessed. So think of that as well. And then the final thing we have in terms of a resource is the expendable resources. So this is obviously the things that come in and then leave or get thrown away or get used up or whatever that might be. So easiest thing that we can think of are boxes, shipping materials, tape, bags, technically pens, printer ink, paper, batteries if you're not using rechargeable ones, all that kind of stuff, where you purchase it and then it gets used up. This is also like, the easiest way to think of this is like food. As a human to live, we need to use these consumable / expendable resources.
Utilities.
Yeah, I guess electricity comes in and goes away. Sure. Yeah, stuff like that. Expendable resources, things that you don't get to keep. You could not liquidate at the end of the day because they get used up. So, and this is a big cost generally, especially for businesses that do fulfillment, I think, because you have those costs of, unfortunately, you can't just ship a piece on its own. You have to put it in a bag, you have to put it in a box, and you have to put a shipping label on it. And all of that you never get back. This
is something that I've talked about, and now 2 episodes late, our budget, which is more of a cost calculator. Finding the exact expendable cost for something is actually done. I don't know if we wanted to talk exact amounts or not, but going through and figuring out exactly the cost of everything didn't just mean figuring out the cost of the package, because also we send out refunds, or not refunds, we send out replacement parts, all of that kind of stuff. And so when you are conducting your inventory analysis, it's also very important to make sure that you are taking into account your full expenditure of all of the expendables that you're going to be doing to stay on track, which brings us to our next topic of resource allocation. Make a budget. A budget is not just money. A budget can include any resource. And look at every process you have and figure out how much you think it should be taking. This should be educated too. You shouldn't just say, oh, I think I can do it in. You should use data, or if you don't have data yet, you should make as close to an accurate guess as you can get.
Yeah, something we did when we were making out our initially what we pay per bin of B sort was we actually went and weighed pieces of that category and figured out how many cubic whatever could fit in the in a bin, and then how much weight that was, and then how much value that was, and then how long it would take. Like, we did all this math just to try and figure out what we should pay people. It wasn't 100% accurate, but it was way closer than if we just said, oh, I think that bin's $50, and then all of a sudden it took someone 40 hours or something ridiculous to sort that bin. So do a little bit of research and put some effort in when you're budgeting, whether it's time, resources, or really anything. That resources fits everything in it. So when you say really resources, you can't add anything else to that list. But make sure it's an informed guess. Yeah. Did you have more on that?
I was just going to say, check in then. When something doesn't line up with your expected budget, investigate why. And it's not always the process that needs to be changed. Sometimes the process is efficient and your budget is wrong. So don't try to hold reality to your numbers. Try and hold the numbers to reality.
Definitely. Yeah. Especially if you don't want your team constantly reaching for an unachievable goal. That's just like really bad for morale and everything. Yep. And we've done this before where we reach for an unachievable goal. And it's a weird balance for us. It kind of works in a way, because when we reach 75% of that goal instead of what our goal would have been at like 50, then it's like better. But for some people, like, it just doesn't work when you never achieve a goal. It doesn't feel good. Another big thing in terms of being more resourceful is cross-training employees. You can benefit from someone understanding, not just because they're capable of doing different things in your business, but understanding the process of everything can actually make one specific process better in terms of how they do it.
Absolutely.
If they're adding parts and they've never picked before, they might not understand what inconveniences might be caused when you add certain parts into a drawer.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden now, if they've picked and they start to see that, now it makes sense why they shouldn't add these pieces together, and it makes your entire business better. A key thing to remember about this, though, is you don't want to overtrain people in terms of they're cross-trained on every aspect of your business.
Yeah.
Unless you're a small enough business. But
Correct.
once your business grows too much and you have people that are split everywhere, it becomes very difficult sometimes for them to actually be able to just focus on a task now, because there's way too many things that they know, or there's too many rules, things like that.
This goes double for new employees. It takes potentially decades for someone in a medium business. It takes potentially decades for an employee to really be able to work anything. And at that point, they're probably some kind of manager. It's very unrealistic to expect a new employee to understand every facet of your business. It's just going to be information overload. Basically, cross-training is there to make sure that hours aren't being wasted, right? Make sure that there's always a task that they can perform, and don't hire multiple people to work half days. Hire one person to work a full day is kind of the general philosophy here.
Yeah. And you'll save more money when hiring one person versus two, as long as that, I'm sure we'll have an employees or a hiring thing at some point. Which we can get into that. Another thing you want to be doing in terms of being a little more resourceful is networking. I know we've talked about this for sure, just with the fact that we've been able to, we have a Discord and everything, and we're able to now talk to so many people in the industry that we probably wouldn't have talked to had we not started the YouTube channel. I'm sure we wouldn't be in any form of a community, or maybe a little bit, but not like we are in this sense. And so network with the people around you. Use that as a resource. And I think a really big thing with this is do not be afraid to ask for help. When something's not going well for you, sure, it might be a little embarrassing and stuff, but I'd prefer to be a little embarrassed and admit it and fix the problem than sit on this problem for months or years or whatever, not understand what the issue is.
The worst thing that's going to happen most of the time is that you're going to be ignored. Like, people comment on our videos all the time, and we can't answer every single one of them. But the literally worst thing, I mean, unless someone who's not us comments on it, in which case hopefully we'll catch it if someone's harassing in the comments. But the worst case that happens is we're just not going to have the time to answer it, and it's just going to go unanswered. But we do try to answer a lot of them. And so, post something in the comments. And something that's really important here is don't just ask within your industry. Network, a lot of people. There's this rule called the 6 degrees of separation. And basically, every single person in the world can be connected to every other person in the world within 6 handshakes. And obviously, I'm not saying go ahead and try and find Elon Musk over 6 degrees. What I'm saying is, if you're looking for a specific skill, chances are someone who knows someone who has that skill. And, using that link, saying, hey, I'm this person's friend, to even just be able to ask a simple question can be a really valuable resource. This goes also for family, is you have a family, and I would hope, and you might, sometimes, especially for the younger crowd, it can be a little bit weird to ask parents for help just because you want to be on your own and stuff. But being willing to use the knowledge that your parents, your relatives, your uncle, grandpa, whatever have, they have a lifetime of experience, and chances are they also know someone, right? Mm-hmm. And that really shouldn't be forgotten about, because there's probably someone within your family tree who's likely to help you because you're related, who knows how to solve the problem you're working on, or at least can provide some advice.
Yep. Another point in terms of being a little more resourceful is think extractively. You really want to, when trying to, like when a resource comes in, when you have something in front of you, don't just use it for the minimal aspect. We talked about a lemon last night. It would not make any sense if you cut a lemon and you drop one drop into your glass of water and you say you're done. Most people would then go with the thought of okay, yeah, you're going to juice the entire lemon and then toss it. But even then, you still have a lot of waste. You want to think about okay, I want to juice the lemon and then I'm going to zest the lemon. And now I've taken everything off of that lemon that I can. Use every resource to the full capability. A lot of it is more than just that single thing you see it as.
Eat your banana with the peel on, as they say. It has nutrients. No, please don't do that. So
essentially, just don't waste stuff before tossing it or before throwing it away or or throwing it aside and saying, I don't need this anymore. And another thing is, when a strategy might not work for a specific thing you're doing, don't throw that whole concept aside. Table it, and maybe it didn't work for what you're trying to fix, but that might work for a whole different project or something.
Definitely.
And obviously that's very abstract with just saying that, but like if you have a plan to do something and it doesn't work, that plan you might be able to, like, you know, more big scale than just an idea. Usually you'd be able to try on a new thing. We talked about this a little bit, but very, 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 very important is understanding that time is a resource.
Yes, this is one of, if not probably the most misunderstood concept that I come across. And I mean, we make the mistake all the time, but your labor is never free. Even if you have no skills, no education, you can probably still go make minimum wage working at McDonald's. So if what you're doing isn't worth the federal minimum wage of $7.25, and I'm not saying you're making $7.25 right now, I'm just saying eventually you're going to be able to back pay yourself for that, then it's not worth your time. Obviously, this is different for like doing stuff for fun in your off time, but I'm talking about you want to build a business or do a career. Your time has value even if you're going into time debt. The idea is that you're going to pay yourself back for all of the time you've invested in the future. And so don't get trapped in my time is free. Your time is never free. You have a finite amount of it. You can always go broke and come back from that. You can pay off debt. You know, you can hopefully recover from a medical injury. There's lots of things that you can recover from, but you can never get your time back. You're going to die, and there's nothing you can really do about that. And so,
wow.
I know. I mean, it's really true. Is time is your most expensive resource, right? It is the only resource upon which you cannot really return on. Mm-hmm. It only decreases. It never increases. And so, obviously, you know, you can afford better healthcare potentially or whatever, but in general, it only goes down. So make sure you're spending your time wisely and don't waste time on processes that really could be solved by spending just a little bit of a different resource. Mm-hmm. Time should kind of be your resource of last resort.
Yeah.
Within reason.
Yeah. Now, obviously, when you're really small, your time is less valuable than money.
Correct.
But again, you just talked about that whole back pay concept of like this equals more in the future.
Correct.
It's not just like, whatever, I got free time. Like, sure, but not really. And our final thing on this list of, you know, trying to, what was this list for? Be more resourceful.
Yes.
Is having a concept of understanding that things just need to work. It doesn't need to be perfect. And reaching for perfection, as hard as it sounds to say that you should get rid of that concept, reaching for perfection or reaching perfection is pretty much impossible.
It's infinitely expensive.
Yeah. And, you know, ideally, like if we go to our store, ideally it would make the most sense and be the coolest if every column was like the same piece and it was organized by color, and then the next column was another type of piece organized by color, but like that doesn't make any sense.
I do see a lot of stores that try to do this, and there are some organizations that make sense. Having all of your new in one thing makes picking a little bit more efficient, because you can bag the new and then be done with it. But in general, it probably doesn't matter where a piece goes. And obviously this is Lego specific, but it goes for a lot of stuff. Does it really matter under which barcode a thing goes? Some things, yes, it absolutely does. But just to have a neatly organized warehouse, no. Now, having a mess does slow things down. So it's fine if something looks like a mess, is kind of what we're getting to. Is if someone who has no knowledge walks in and they look at it and they go, oh, this is a mess, that's totally fine. They don't understand what they're looking at. What's important is that you and your team know where everything is and are able to go at this, you know, at a very, you know, efficient pace.
Yeah, and not just knowing where everything is, but having the capability to have a resource that tells you where something
exactly.
is.
Yeah.
You don't actually need to obviously know, but being able to use the tools that you have to organize.
And this goes,
like if someone walked in our store, well, actually, people walk in our store and go, whoa, it's so organized. But if they started looking through drawers, they would realize there's no rhyme or reason to anything.
Correct.
However, when you have the software and everything that has a remark and a drawer number and everything on it, then obviously at that point now you know where stuff is. But again, that is something where you have to take two resources and combine them together. It wouldn't work just standalone.
And this isn't just physical organization. This goes for all processes and stuff. An example I used the other day is the restaurant, or maybe like a hotel would maybe be more accurate, is you walk into the fancy hotel. It looks super nice. It's got nice carpeting. Everything is like super perfect. And then you step into the back room, right, where all of the employee stuff happens, and it's a concrete floor, drop ceiling, and unpainted walls.
Mm-hmm.
And
front of the house, customer facing is nice.
Yes.
But it doesn't need to be on the backside.
No, and that's not saying you should make your employees live in squalor. No. That's not at all what I'm saying, right? If the light doesn't work, please fix it. It's just that not everything needs to be as good as the customer-facing side.
Yeah. Another big thing to remember is quality is incredibly subjective.
Very much so.
So you need to understand that there is a point at which there is an MVP or a minimum viable product. When you reach that, then you can ask yourself, do we need to get it a little bit better, or is it fine or whatever? But don't reach for that perfection, because it's never going to get there, especially if you are the one who sets that concept of perfection.
Yeah.
Most people, if you see a whole blueprint of a design and you see all the corners that were cut, then of course you're going to be, oh my God, this is nowhere near what it's supposed to be. However, you got to remember the customer never sees the blueprint and never sees all the corners that were cut. Now, if they do see the corners that were cut, then of course you have a problem, and that might not be your minimal viable product. You might need to step it up then. But keep in mind, it's better to release something that is done and good than to never release something because it never becomes perfect.
Yeah.
However, again, if you're reaching for something that can never be good, then don't release it. And that's that sunk cost fallacy, where maybe you just toss it at the end of the day because it is never going to be right. But it's better to release something that is good and above what people expect than to release.
Yeah.
You
nothing. As the engineer are always going to understand that your product is not perfect.
Yeah.
So just look at it from a customer's perspective and be like, yeah, this is a good product.
Right. And we have a problem with this all the time.
Oh, yeah.
Where Paul and I have really high expectations for things, and we need to take a step back and say, does it matter? Does it really make sense that we're spending all this time or this money or whatever on this? Or should we just say, yeah, it's actually pretty good. Let's let the customers have it or whatever.
Something like this is YouTube all the time. We can release something that we look at and go oh, this is garbage. And it's still, people are like, oh, it looks so cinematic or whatever. And that's only because we spent all this time thinking about it, and we could see what it could be.
But had we just seen the video on YouTube, we'd be totally happy. If someone else posted it, we'd be totally happy. But only because we know what it could have been or something. A lot of people really liked the store expansion where we built a new wall last time. However, I was really unhappy with the building scene because that's not what I wanted. I did what I could with the time I had and everything, but it's I had a different vision for that. However, everyone's reply to that was that they liked it. But I just know that it was not what I was going for. I had a totally different vision. But, we still released it. It wasn't like we were going to cut that whole video because I didn't know that. We have finally, I think, gotten over that concept of everything needs to be perfect.
Yeah.
It took us a long time.
A video needs to come out on time. Pieces need to go out at the end of the day. And the store needs to grow.
Yeah.
And
whatever we can do to make that happen is what we do to make that happen.
Yep.
Pretty much. Kind of getting into our next, or do you want to intro this?
Yeah. We can talk about, as you grow, more people come on, and you want to hope that your employees are going to be resourceful too. And as you are hiring and as you are building your company culture, which is something that I believe we had a whole or at least a partial episode on, is encouraging a culture of resourcefulness within your company. And your employees are really valuable. They're people, and they're people, but your employees have a lot of self-worth, and I mean, without if you wouldn't be hiring employees if you didn't need them, right? And so you need to understand how valuable your employees are. And when they're not being resourceful, it's some of that value is not being used, right? And so what I think personally, one of the best ways to help motivate employees to be more resourceful is that by getting their job done faster, by getting their job done more efficiently, by being innovative, being creative, and being dedicated to the business, they are helping to maximize their personal value, not just for the business, but for themselves as well, by learning, by being creative, by improving, by training. And now the most important part of this is that it needs to be true. You need to be providing opportunities for their resourcefulness, for their ingenuity, and for their personal values to manifest and be a part of your business. And it can be really hard sometimes when you're laying out employee rules, especially talking about budget, finances, all this stuff, to be really miserly or penny pinching or guilt trip employees. And you don't want to do that. You want to make sure that if there's a reason why you tell employees to do something hard instead of an obvious, easy solution, there's really a reason for it. And the reason isn't just, I want more money in my pocket. Obviously, there's a small part of it where it's you want to maximize profit. That's the point of a business. But really, there should be a more complicated underlying reason. By going the harder route, you're maximizing value, and that should be coming back to them.
Right. And it's really good when you share that reason.
Yes.
Versus like at least from what I've seen, one of the biggest issues is where you just give a task and you say, this is how to do it. And then they think there's a better way to do it, and you don't tell them why there isn't, or why their way isn't better. You just say, no, just do it this way. Being able to take that minute and a half to explain, not the full process, but just a little bit of why we do it this way instead, gives them such a better understanding, and also I think reduces their frustration into thinking there's a better way to do it, and that your boss is just ignoring you because they don't want to hear it.
Absolutely.
And then it just makes the entire workplace better when they have, and we talked briefly on this in the cross-training thing a moment ago or a few minutes ago, but where they have an idea of what's happening and everything so that they're more content with a certain process that they're doing.
Yeah. Put yourself in your employees' shoes. Would you be frustrated? Right? Your employees, they are a resource, but they are a human resource. There's a reason why we don't just call them a resource or the labor machine, right? They are a human being, and that means that they have thoughts going on inside their head. And I mean, this is obvious, but the farther extracted you go, and the larger your business becomes, and the less you interact with other people on a daily basis, the harder this is to really keep in the forefront of your mind. Is a happy employee is efficient, effective, and willing to contribute. And them feeling like what they're doing is actually noticeably improving the company, right? People are tribal people. We like contributing to a whole. And it's important that we get something out of it too, but there is something just about contributing. And when it feels like your contributions don't matter, when you can't see the effect of your contributions, it feels less like you're contributing to the group and more like you're contributing to your boss. And
right. And that contribution and that feeling of being able to build something bigger also usually encourages employees to find better ways to do things.
Yes.
And that's, I think, a really big thing is when employees are trying to innovate on their own without being like told to do so, you need to reward that in some way.
Yes.
Like help them, like, I don't know what that, however that means to you, but they're making a really strong effort to better the business, even though they're not seeing that it's directly going to affect them in a better way. Some of their motivations are going to be selfish in terms of my task would be easier if we do this and this and this. Still reward them for that because they're providing a benefit for...
Something really important about that is if their task gets easier and gets faster, that is better for the business. It's not just selfish.
No. That's not. I wasn't saying it was negative at all.
Okay.
I'm just saying that's usually the default where people start is how can this be easier for me? But once they expand way past that and saying like, what if we do this for the entirety of the business? A really good thing that I really enjoy, or not enjoy, but I love seeing, just because it really shows that this person cares so much, is when they come up with a concept that actually causes them to do more work. Not like it slows down their task, but like it puts more on their plate. It shows that they're taking initiative to like want to do something. And I'm not just talking about in terms of our specific business, but just in people that I've seen, whether I work with them or manage or whatever, when people put more on their plate because they want to do a better job for the business, it's like that is the best thing in the world. But when they're not rewarded for that, I've been on that receiving end too, where I'll put more and more and more and more and more work in to build something better and better and better. And when you never see a return on that, it does hurt for sure as the employee.
Yeah.
So as the boss, the owner, whatever, the manager, you need to provide as much of a return as you can for them because they're working to grow the business.
You need to make sure that your valuable assets want to stay. Right.
Absolutely.
Your most valuable employees, they're probably very innovative, very entrepreneurial people. And you want them to feel valued in the business. And this is partially where I can slip a bit into the gold star mindset. But there are lots of other ways. And for many people, simply seeing their contributions actually implemented into company policy, right? If someone suggests something, and then you say, oh, okay, go ahead and try it with your unit. And then it works really well. And then a couple months later, you have an all employees meeting or whatever, you hand out a new employee handbook or whatever, and they're leafing through it and they see their policy in there. That is potentially reward enough because it's like you feel, assuming they don't think you stole their idea or whatever, but that you should be rewarding them financially as well and stuff. But seeing that can be a major motivator in the sense of like, I made an actual difference that actually got, put into policy.
Yeah. Do you want to get into the role?
Yeah. So as a leader, you obviously need to be demonstrating efficiency and resourcefulness. And being budget conscious is a big part of that. We'd already talked about not being miserly, but still educating employees on your budget and being budget minded and understanding the worth of things and being able to quickly describe the worth of things, right? If you are working, when employees see you come in and be on the floor, when you work quickly, when you work fast, when you minimize resource expenditure yourself, they're going to hopefully want to reflect that because they see it's not just them who's under this burden. It's a company burden. The whole company needs to be resource efficient, and we're working together to be resource efficient.
Yeah. Something minimal that I do, and maybe it frustrates people. I don't think it does. I personally prefer when it's like that, is when I'm talking to people who are working for us, whether they're picking or cataloging or whatever, I don't say, you need to be doing it this way. I almost always say, we want to do it this way.
Yeah.
Because the truth is, as a company, as a collective, we want to do it. It also doesn't make it feel like I'm just demanding orders to them. From my perspective, at least, and how I've been talked to and stuff, I prefer that too, is making it feel like it's a team effort just in the everyday talks of saying, let's make sure we use this bag because it costs less money or whatever, versus saying you need to use this bag because it costs less money. It's just it just feels more friendly and more like a team effort then.
It really is true that a business is a collective. And I realize that might irritate some people, but it really is true. Everybody, the wealth is being distributed. You are managing, right? You are in charge and you are taking a larger share. But what the employees are doing should also be being rewarded directly and financially. And so it really is a we effort. And by making that very evident that you are the owner, but you are also another employee serving the business, right? And you might be in charge of the business, but we are all part of something that is larger than any one person, including the owner. And to me, at least personally, that is something that makes me way more invested in a company, is feeling like we're all contributing to this thing, including the people above me.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. It does feel good when you see everyone working together.
Yeah.
Versus you just think that you're doing all the work.
Everyone is equal, but some people are in charge of optimizing everyone else, is kind of how I like to think about it, right? Where every employee is just an employee, but some employees are in charge of making sure that other employees are helping the company in specific ways.
Mm-hmm. So obviously we've talked a lot about resourcefulness, how to be resourceful, what resourcefulness means, The funniest thing about this, I think, is we are really, really bad at being resourceful.
Yeah, totally.
In the beginning, I think we were actually like especially bad because it's like the second we thought we needed something, it's like, oh, we got to go buy it. Now, not to say we haven't been resourceful in some ways. Theoretically, we could have moved out, but instead of that, we're continuing to build walls and utilize the space that we currently have available. I think we're pretty much at our max now, so we're like very, very close. But another thing is, from the very beginning, we actually there were shelves that we had access to. Like, we were able to use shelves for 2 years almost, and those shelves that we were using were free. They didn't cost anything to us. Now, they were slightly inefficient due to the fact that the spacing on them wasn't exact. We weren't able to adjust the spacing, and we put some bins up there, and there was a lot of excess room, but we were using that when we could, very initially. We didn't just throw it away. We reuse bags, so catalogers, B sorters, whatever, the bags get reused. It's not like we just, once they're done, we throw them away. That'd be a colossal waste of not only money, but also just like plastic and everything. Cross-training pickers was a big one for us, where now they can do more in-store tasks, so they can actually pick. If they want, they could verify and ship, and then they can also do reassignment, where a drawer is halfway off the wall because it's half empty and we want to put another piece in the other side. They're capable of doing that as well now. Initially, we didn't really train on that because we were concerned, we just want them to focus on a task. But now that they've expanded in terms of what they're able to do, we can let them be free a little bit more. And then another resource that we've had is just my filmmaking skill set that I, from my professional work and stuff.
Yeah.
While it's not used to its full potential here at all, we've been able to utilize that resource just in some of what we do to make it appear better
with
minimal effort.
What it would cost for someone else to make the YouTube videos, we're able to do for a fraction of the price. And that, you understand, this does circle back to employees too. Ask about your employees' hobbies and personal life. Like, a lot of people, when they show up to a job interview or whatever, they're there to talk about their education and their formal job experience. You would be shocked at the types of hobbies that people have and how useful some of those hobbies can be, right? Like, this might be more in the IT industry, but like, someone runs a home lab where, they run a media server or something like that. Or maybe more for us, right? If someone, I feel like they would bring up whether they're a Lego collector or not. But maybe someone is an interior designer or, some kind of warehouse layout specialist, or something like that, right? Where they have this obscure, weird hobby. That's a skill set that can be utilized. And getting your employees to open up and talking about that, and also looking at your skills and seeing how they can be applied in unconventional ways is something to really not underestimate.
Yeah, definitely. I think we're pretty much wrapping it up.
Yeah. We do want to end with a little statement.
Yeah.
A kind of disclaimer. We've reiterated this a bunch, but you still have to be willing to spend your resources to acquire new ones. Resources don't grow on their own. Obviously, like a garden might, but you have to buy those seeds.
No, not even that. It needs sunlight, it needs water, and it needs the nitrogen and nutrients that are in the soil.
Yeah, but you're not paying for that.
Okay.
I meant more like at a certain point, you have to get rid of resources and then gain more because you got rid of them. And don't get trapped in the trap of not spending any money, please. The goal of exploiting a less fit tool is to gain the resources to buy a better one.
Yes, I agree.
And if you have to use something inefficient, because there are no other options right now, your number one goal is using that resource to be able to buy a better one. Don't stay stuck in a bad process just because you don't want to upgrade. Please, please, please. This is the number one thing that I see, especially in our community and stuff, is like, please, your goal is to become more efficient to make more profit. So please become more efficient to make more profit. Be willing to upgrade. Be willing to, just be willing to upgrade.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you to everyone who is either watching or listening to this. Again, you can watch this on YouTube or listen to it on your favorite podcast platform. Giving us a rating does help quite a bit.
If you have questions, please feel free to come check us out on Discord or in our YouTube comment section, where the Discord link can also be found.
Yeah, and if you have any specific topics you'd like to hear about on BrickSide Chat, we would love to hear it, and we'll definitely take it into consideration for an episode idea.
Thank you, and have a good rest of your day.
Yep, we'll see you in the next episode of BrickSide Chat.
Goodbye.